Welcome to another episode of Rose Resource Room. Today I'm here with Heather, and I'm so excited to talk to her because not only does she know all things about homeschooling and homeschooling on a budget, but also about homesteading. So we're going to jump in and learn about Heather, the woman, first before we get into her homeschool journey. So, Heather, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be here.
Thank you so much. So, I always like to give my guests some time to talk about themselves, just as Heather the woman, not your titles, not all the roles, not all the hats we play. So, tell me a little bit about you, and then feel free to share more about your homeschool journey.
Sure. So I am currently living in Virginia. We have been here for about 20 years, but I do like to let people know that actually I'm originally from New York and my husband's from Pennsylvania. And it's important to point that out because I do not sound like I'm from the South. And even after being down here 20 years, people still approach me and say, "You're not from around here, are you?" And I say, "Does 20 years count?"
Right.
So we decided to move down here after meeting in Bible school. We both went to a Bible college down here in Virginia,
Mhm.
and we fell in love with the area. We fell in love with the people and the landscape, and we found our homestead, the area that we wanted to raise our children, and it has just been thriving and doing so well. And it's where we've just been able to grow. And I'm a first generation Christian, first generation homesteader. So I just feel like um, if you visit my blog, you can, just hear different encouragement of how to do it. If you weren't raised in a family of homeschooling or homesteading, you can be the first one to do it yourself. And so that's what I like to bring to the table.
I love that. And it's really encouraging because I think homeschooling has become more mainstream, where before it was just a certain group of people who did it, whether they were military or, they came from a family or generation of it. So it was their norm. But now, post COVID and into 2026, we can definitely say it's more mainstream. So for someone who's like, well, I want to do it too, I love that you can share from that perspective. So, how did you decide to homeschool? Like, why was it the Bible school that kind of convinced you? Like, why did you jump into that decision?
Homeschooling definitely was a religious conviction.
Okay.
I had gone to college actually in Pennsylvania, Messiah University, and I had received a degree in Christian education, Christian ministries with education. And my goal was to start a school, whether it was in America or in another country for orphans. I had all these big dreams and I had this passion for Christian education. I didn't know why. And like I said, the first generation thing is when I would read the Bible and especially Genesis, I would realize that there were different things I had been taught in the public school that didn't align with my Christian values. And so I was thinking at first, this is going to be what I'm going to do in a Christian education, whether it was ministry, missionary work, or in a Christian school. But then as I started developing in my faith, and even before I met my husband, something in me just knew I'm going to be a mother, and I want to teach my kids, about creationism. I want to teach my kids about the Bible, and I want to teach my kids about all these revelations I'm having as a new believer. And so as I began to develop in my relationship with the Lord and incorporate that in what I had been learning with my degree, and you don't need a degree to homeschool. I have to put that out there. But that was my story. And so I realized I want to homeschool even before I was married. And so then when I met my husband, he had wanted to homeschool as well. So
Oh,
we
wow.
always knew that was going to be our experience. And even before we had kids, we knew this is what we want. And it's just grown from there.
Awesome. How old are your children?
I have five children. I have one that's graduated. He's 19. Another one that's going to graduate this year, who's 18. Another high schooler, my only daughter. She is almost 16. And then I have two elementary age boys, and they are 8 and 10. So I am in the trenches, but I've also graduated one. So I'm just all across the board.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And it's really encouraging. So, I have a question for you when it comes to homeschooling. So, we
Yes.
hear about thrift schooling and we hear people talking about homeschooling on a budget. Before we get into some tips, what are some misconceptions that people typically have when they hear homeschooling or thrift schooling on a budget?
Well, I think for thrift schooling, I think people might be turned off like, oh, I'm not going to be able to educate my kids with high quality materials if I don't put the money into it. If I'm just
Mhm.
using these free websites or just going to the library and using free resources, my kids are not going to get a quality education. But I would say to that, that as the parent, you are the teacher regardless of the curriculum that you use. So regardless of the curriculum that you use, there's a lot of discipleship that happens. So you could spend $2,000 per kid per semester on high quality curriculum, but if you're not taking those breaks to work in whatever your beliefs are, your morals or discipline that you want to give your child, then it's all for nothing. So in my classes, I just like to talk about where are our priorities and where do we want to spend our money? Because it might be in we want to have certain vacations. We might want to have a mission trip planned, or educational field trip. And, we had the wonderful opportunity, our family, to go on a year-long mission trip. And there's no way if my kids were in public school, possibly private school, that that would have happened. But we were able to work that in. And it was also homesteading involved in that. And we were able to do what we felt like we were called to do because we were able to set our priorities straight. And so that's really what thrift schooling is. It's not just, oh, we're going to just find things on Pinterest and just hope for the best. But there's a definite plan, definite purpose, different like goal and vision to see what we want to see for our kids, the goals that we have for our kids in all aspects of life, not just education, and then education will come.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh, Heather, there was so much to unpack there because you talked about the discipleship piece. And I know I'm guilty. I remember when I first started homeschooling, I would meet someone, I'm like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. What curriculum do you use? And I would go straight into the academic piece. And I remember thinking, if I really want Christ to be at the center of what I do, then it can't be the curriculum. That can't be what's most important. And when I talk about financial budget, and I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to be told no. I don't want a piece of paper or a statement telling me no, no, no. But what I'm hearing you saying is the thrift school is actually your yes. That's how you get to the fabulous vacation. That's how you get to being able to do the other things because you're not focusing or overspending on areas that are actually not the most important. You're putting first things first and prioritizing what matters. So thrift school is actually saying yes to a whole world of other things. I love that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, talk to me. Give me some tips. When you are thrift schooling or you're doing a workshop, what are the basic things? Like, where do you start looking? What does that look like?
Okay, so a lot of it has to do with the ages of your kids and how many children you have. I do not want to forget or neglect the homeschool parent with only one child because I have learned so much from these moms and dads who have had one child, and there is no single answer for, the one child, but there's also no single answer if you have multiple children. So I'll start with the single child. If you only have one child, then most likely you have a specific budget for how much you want to spend for their curriculum. The key is knowing how that particular child learns and how you can effectively teach.
Mm.
So there might be a certain curriculum that jumps out at you in the curriculum hall. You want to buy it. Maybe it is computer based and maybe you work from home and this just seems like a great fit. But then as you begin your years, maybe you're starting this in first grade, second grade, and then you see that your child is more of a hands-on learner, like one that just needs to be outdoors and needs to be more active. This is when you need to begin to pivot. And this is when
Mm.
you need to say, okay, maybe I don't need to spend all my money on this boxed curriculum, but I can begin using unit studies. I can begin using different materials. The vendor hall has so many different materials that are not necessarily a full curriculum,
Mhm.
but you can have the ability to create your own curriculum. I know Pennsylvania has very strict rules, but even within those rules, and I know there's going to be people speaking at the convention about that, even within those rules, you can still get very creative with what you're using and how you're teaching your child. You don't need to be boxed in to specific curriculum. And so I would encourage this parent to just break from the mold so you can save money, so you don't have to feel like you have to have this particular budget, but it can maybe be half that, a quarter that, if you realize how they learn. And that's what we talk about in the sessions, the different styles of learning, the different styles of curriculum that are out there. So you do not have to maybe do what you've always known. And then when we go into the larger families, I have 5 kids, like I mentioned, and then, maybe if you have more, combine,
Mhm.
combine, and also find homeschool companies that in the front of their book will say that you can use their materials for multiple children for family use. Because there are curriculum companies where you do have to buy the workbook for every single child, which I respect and understand because we want to support Christian companies. And that's another thing I talk about too, is the homeschool curriculum industry. It's not about making money. They make money, but they are serving you. And if we can give our resources to these Christian organizations, most of them family run,
Mm.
then I feel like we're doing a good service instead of just throwing our money out and we don't even know the morals of the people who are putting together this curriculum. So if we can go to the convention, get to know these vendors, go to their workshops, talk to them at the booths, and find out who they are and what their morals are, and you're supporting them, by setting aside your money for those particular companies because you can stand behind them.
I appreciate the depth of that response because initially, what I thought you were going to share, and which would have been great too, would be, well, step one, you go to this website, or step one, you find da da da, and then step two, you do this. But you're saying you need to make sure that you understand the purpose that you have in mind. You need to find out the type of learner, the style, the approach. Are you Charlotte Mason? Are you classical? Are you eclectic? Right? So you really have an amazing first step before getting into finding things for great prices.
I definitely do have a lot of resources on my blog. It's been around since 2012. And, I've been able to help people if, just recently a woman she was a grandparent. She didn't know what kind of Bible to get her preschooler. And so I could point her to these different places of good quality Bibles for preschoolers that they could understand. And so there are piles of resources out there, but I do not want to promote a specific curriculum or a specific company because there's so many good ones out there.
Mhm.
And in my workshop, I will give you different particular companies, but that's not my end goal.
Awesome. So, do you have systems in place or do you have a framework? So, you kind of started talking about, before you select your curriculum, you want to make sure that, like what I just said in terms of knowing your why and knowing the style of the child who's learning and, the lifestyle that you want to live. Is there a specific framework? And I'm asking specifically because I have been the person who has piecemealed and I've been the person who said, oh, I'm just going to print the pages. I'm going to get the digital version because it's $20 cheaper. And then I'm printing without purpose, or then I'm printing with purpose and I have no idea where to find this purposeful binder. So, do you have like a system or framework that you could walk someone through to say, this is how you make sure that when you're piecemealing, you're actually not unintentionally creating gaps, and or when you are putting things together, that you can actually find them when you need them?
That is really good. And it's so funny because someone asked me that recently and I was laughing at my answer because I said literally on my computer, I have a folder for each child that I just throw all of the free downloads on. And like that is my basic
Okay.
way of saving things for them. And I just laughed at how simplistic that was. But at the same time, when I'm organized, I bought it's not a 3-ring binder, but it's basically like a binding machine.
Okay.
And of course, thrifty. So I went to this website called Gov Deals, and you can get things where when schools go out of business, they will sell their items dirt cheap. So it's called Gov Deals. It's across the entire country. And I got this machine for $5 just because they wanted to get rid of it. And I'm able to bind things together. So for the younger kids, and this like we were talking about the why, when you're homeschooling, you get to see where the gaps are with your kids. And I know that's the biggest fear that all parents have. But when I notice, okay, my child does not know all of his continents, and I'm embarrassed because of his age, or doesn't know the capitals of the states, and I'm so embarrassed, or different things. And I've had parents come to me and they said, I thought my child knew this fact, and they don't even know it. And they get so nervous and scared. I'm ready to put them into school. And I say, no, 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 no. You're seeing the gaps. So what we're gonna do is you're gonna find the materials, create the materials using Canva. Very easy if you're that type of person, or find them. And then you just make a little folder and have 5 worksheets,
Mhm.
or 2 or 3, depending on the age of your child, several worksheets for each day, and just label Monday, have a couple worksheets, Tuesday, have a couple worksheets. And then I'll tell my kids, okay, it's folder time, and we will have a system. We start with Bible, then we go to folder time, and then we do our read alouds, but they know that folder time is going to be in there, and they don't know that it's like these random facts that I put in there because I'm nervous that they don't know that. But I know. And they're excited to do it because it's this independent work that they're able to do even at a young age.
And it's also beneficial to you because if you get a call that you have to take, at least now there's a system in place that says, all right,
Yeah.
pivot to your folder system, pivot to your independent task. Mommy needs
Yeah,
15 minutes.
that's right.
And that's always goal because the alternative is the whole day's derailed because the kids ran away, right? No, I appreciate that. And even with your answer about the folder, that in itself, like, I'm not mad at simple. If simple is sustainable, I think it's perfect. So I love both systems that you share. The electronic one where you're like, oh, found this, love this, put it under name of child. And then
Yeah.
the other one where you actually print it out and you probably have like sheet protectors or whatever. I think whatever works for the family, it's gold. But I really appreciate you saying that because I can hear someone saying, oh, but if I print all this stuff and da da da. And the last piece is when you talked about the gaps. You're not creating gaps. You were able to fill in gaps through the system. It's gold. I love it. All right. Do you have anything that you want to share about thrift schooling? Because you mentioned homesteading, and I want to jump into that. So, what are your thoughts, or like, what are questions that people always ask you that you're like, I have to tell you this about thrift schooling?
I think the main thing about thrift schooling is that it can be done on a budget. And a lot of parents, they might think, I don't have enough money to homeschool. And one of the big things I talk about in thrift steading, but I also want to mention in thrift schooling is, you know, you you don't need to have X amount of dollars to be in charge of your child's education. And they want to be home with you. And so you might not feel like you're totally present, but everything that you're giving them, they're going to treasure that forever. So my goal with thrift schooling really is to bring parents home if they're not home yet, or to keep them home if they are home and they're scared that their kids aren't getting everything that they need, because ultimately it comes down to spending the time with them, and focusing on that time that you have with your children during these years.
Beautiful and well said. Thank you. All right. So let's jump into homesteading. At the basic core, what is homesteading? And then walk me through because I know you're not the person who says, well, the first thing you do is you buy 100 acres of land. You make it more accessible and people can actually do it because you're starting from smaller. So give us a basic overview of homesteading and the possible options, and then how we can initially jump in.
Well, I love how you mentioned the 100 acres, because the difference between homesteading and farming, and I know there's a lot of farms, I mean, everywhere in the country, but in Pennsylvania, you know, a farm, when you're driving down 81 or wherever, you just see these cows for miles and miles. That's a farm. That's their income. They're not mostly living, the farmers are not living there. That's a facility that they own
Mhm.
to make money. A homestead, it happens on your home. So a farm is a company, an organization. It's on a mass scale, whereas homesteading, you're just bringing some of those aspects of farming to your home. So there's a term that is thrown around in the homestead community called permaculture. And with that, you start in your home, and that's, your home unit. Then you need to think about, what do you need on a daily basis? So if you could think about, okay, what do I really want? If I want to get started on homesteading, I would love to have herbs. I would love to have tomatoes. So you would have that close. You would have that on your deck. You would have that, right around the perimeter of your home if possible. Then we're going to move out a little further. Okay, I would love to have chickens because eggs in the morning would be great. So then you would bring that out a little further. And then if you can go even further, depending on how much acreage you have, and you don't even need an acre, maybe you would want to get some fruit trees and have that on the perimeter of your property. So you would move out depending on what you have. But at the same time, homesteading is a mindset. So there's a lot you can do within the home, and we can talk about that too. And I will definitely talk about that during my workshop, where if you have the desire to homestead, you don't have to have a lot of acreage. There are so many things that you can do, making soap, grinding your own wheat, and doing sourdough. There's so many different things, making your own candles. And there's a lot of reasons why you might want to do that. If this seems like it's way out in left field, I could go to the supermarket and buy bread. Why would I grind my own? There's so many reasons as to why you could, and I'm excited to share at the convention why it can be beneficial in your homeschool.
Awesome. So you said it's a mindset. What is the mindset? Is it independence? Is it I want to be off the grid? Is it sustainability, cleanliness? What exactly is the homesteading mindset? And does it differ?
Well, it definitely differs. There's definitely different communities out there. I know for us, we all have our own different reasons for homeschooling. And so homesteaders always have different reasons. And I know for us, it's self-sufficiency, but also sufficiency in the
Mm.
sense that we're not trying to be self-sufficient in the sense that we think we can do better, but using what God has given us, we're trying to step away from being dependent on everything around us, because if things fall, I mean, we saw things happen where I wasn't able to go to the grocery store and buy enough food for my children. I was limited. I could only buy one pack of chicken, and I had 7 kids to feed. So we don't know what's coming. And, I know there's a lot of different prepper reasons and different things like that. The way that my husband and I, uh, the reason we got started is we looked and we said, okay, there is going to be a time in the Bible where people are not going to be able to buy and sell, and it's going to happen. Now, it might not be for hundreds and hundreds or thousands of years, but if we can teach our kids these practical skills, they can teach their kids, they can teach their kids, and so on. And so we felt it was important to teach our kids these skills, even if they don't want to do it when they grow up. It's drawing us together as a family, it's keeping us closer, and it's helping us to know if things go bad in this country, then we're able to sustain ourselves. And a lot of what I talk about in the workshop is connection with other homesteaders. So, and this is what we do a lot of. We'll trade. If we make bone broth, and we'll trade for hay for our cows, or we'll do different things, making connections with the community around us. So we're not doing it alone, but we're also not being dependent on, I mean, I hate to say not being dependent on the government, but I mean, if we've all taken our kids out of government schools, and I'm sure we're on the same page with that, but we're not dependent on the situations that we find ourselves in, but we can, you know, let God provide for us.
I love it. You're literally creating the village. And I love the piece about sustainability too, because like you said, there were times when they said, oh, you can only buy one bottle of this and one bottle of that. And then what do? You don't just starve. You figure out how to can something and how to make
Right.
sure ahead of time, right? Like we don't prepare during war. We prepare when there's peace. So very insightful. Thank you for sharing. So what is, I feel like I heard you say you can start as small. So if we're talking herbs, I could literally put it on my windowsill, right?
Absolutely.
But to
Absolutely.
actually live or sustain, what is the smallest piece of property that you can actually do something on? Like, are there rules around chickens that they have to have X amount of land to roam?
So there are rules,
Okay.
but chickens are very sustainable. It depends on your county as to if you can have hens, if you can have roosters, or how many you can have. So that's just something that you would have to figure out according to where you live. live. Um, but as far as being sustainable, there are so many books and resources out there about how you can thrive on a single acre. And there's so much that you can do with vertical gardening. There's so much you can do with container gardening. So, and like you mentioned, canning. So there's a lot you can do even inside with grow lights. So there are a lot of things that you can do even if you have a small piece of land. And again, like with the chickens, let's say you live in an area where you can't legally have chickens. This is where you connect with the friend or the person that you meet that does have chickens, but then you can make the bread in your home and then that's where you can trade. So again, it's about making connections, doing what you can with what you have, and then making connections with those who do the others.
Beautiful. All right, let's pivot again because you are a wealth of information and there's so much that you can talk about. I saw that you also talk about different opportunities for moms. So homeschoolers are not monoliths. Not everyone is a stay-at-home mom, not everyone works outside of the home, and not every family has two incomes or one income. So my first question would be, what are some opportunities for moms to work inside the home? Because I know I saw something where you said you wanted to make sure that people weren't being scammed or they weren't seeing these too good to be true opportunities. So if you just had to throw out a list, what are some things that someone could easily say, my heart is at home, but I actually do want to take a vacation here and there. So without stressing my
Yeah.
husband out, maybe I can just put in 5 hours, what would that look like?
So when I first asked that question, because I wanted to know myself, people said to me, well, what are you good at? And that
Okay.
kind of offended me because I just wanted them to give me the list. Like, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. But when you look at the list, a lot of it are scams. So that's why I go back to
Mhm.
that exact answer because I figured out what I was good at was writing. And so that's where I found my source of income. And so I do marketing, consultations for different homeschool companies, and that's how I make my income. I also write articles for different um, folks in the family or, you know, different magazines, and I'm able to supplement my income through my writing. And of course, I'm going to say start a homeschool blog because that has been the best experience for me. I started that years ago, 2012, and I have been able, I mean, I could go on for hours with all the incredible opportunities that opened up through blogging, which is so relevant today, I strongly believe. So there are definite opportunities out there. If I had to sum it up in a nutshell, I would say, what are you good at?
Okay.
And go find that community on LinkedIn and get hooked up with them. Because when I went to LinkedIn and started hooking up with Christian writers, I was able to be published in a book that was similar to like Chicken Soup for the Soul
Yeah.
and get a story out there. And I never would have known about it if it wasn't for LinkedIn. So get connected with your people and opportunities can show up in LinkedIn. Um, if you are just looking for vacations, get connected with mystery shopping.
Ooh.
Again, there's a lot of scams out there, but there's a lot of good ones too. And if you find the right companies, then you are able to, my husband and I have been able to stay in beautiful resorts, beautiful hotels completely for free. And all we were doing, we were writing up evaluations while we were there. So in exchange for our evaluations on the food and the stay, we got, a 2 night stay for free at these beautiful resorts. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. You have to be willing to put the work in. But if you're a homeschool mom, I'm sure you're already that type of person anyway, where you're ready to put the work in, especially if you want a vacation. You'll do the extra work.
That is amazing. So I have a thought. Like, I don't want to ask you what you wish you would do sooner because I don't want us to live in regret. But for someone
Oh,
who's first starting, what would you suggest that they do as it relates to thrift schooling, homesteading, and potentially looking for options to work outside of the house?
that's a
What's something you wish you had known? Maybe I put it like that.
okay. Let's see. One thing I wish I would have known. There's a lot to that question. I think it's knowing who you are. Like, and
Mm,
I'll answer that question as like going back, talking to myself back then. If I was confident in who I was, like if you are confident in who you are, then you're able to give 100%. And I think if I was confident in who I was as a writer, then because that had to develop over time for me to even call myself that. Um, if I was confident enough, I think maybe I would have been able to land more opportunities back then. But I didn't know who I was. I was still trying to figure out who I was in the homeschool space. And so I would just say, find out who you are, pray about it, look at your gifts. I mean, even if you just like you can't think of anything else except for the fact that you speak English, you can teach and I do. I teach a little Chinese boy online while he's in China and he's here. We're 12 hours different. And I don't know Chinese and he doesn't know English, but because I know English and he's eager to learn, I'm able to teach him.
Oh, wow.
So if you're bilingual, then the doors are double wide open for
Right.
you, and there's people out there who want to learn Spanish or whatever language that you might know, so you can create your own opportunity. So I would say that too. Don't be afraid to step out and create your own opportunities instead of fitting everything into a box or signing up for working for a company because you add a lot of value.
I love that. I love how you talked about creating your own opportunities because a lot of times we are looking for the list, right? You can be a mystery shopper, you can be a food critic, you can be this. And then you're like, but I don't want to be that, right? So then you
Exactly.
start from what are you good at? Who are you? What do you enjoy doing? Because then instead of it feeling like a passion project or something on the side that you're doing for fun and for income, now it's real work, right? Like it's
That's right.
dreadful.
Yep.
So I appreciate that. And I love how you talked about creating the opportunities because then now you're filling a gap. So if you see, oh, I see these kids XYZ, and wouldn't it be great if they had ABC? Now you
Yeah.
just created a business out of a need. So I like that. Any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I just want to kind of circle back to encouraging maybe someone who is watching who is considering homeschooling and they're afraid to step out. You can do it. And there's so many resources out there. I had a wonderful opportunity this past year to interview, I think, many homeschool leaders, including Sarah Madden from CHAP, and learn about the history of homeschooling in different states. And when you look back at the history of homeschooling, it was very different in the 80s as it is now. And there's so many more resources, so much more support. And so I am a huge believer in in-person conventions. So I just want to put it out there, get to the convention, go to that convention and get that support that you need because you just don't know if you've never been what you're missing out on.
Yeah, I have to echo that because, like I told you, I live in New Jersey, but we didn't have a state organization here. Thankfully, now we do.
Yes,
But I would go over to Pennsylvania and I'm like, I need in-person connection. I want to flip through. I want to see things. I want to hug people. So I definitely see the value in in-person conventions and from the inspiration to the encouragement to that feeling of, I got this. I can do this. You'll
that's
definitely have
right.
that when you leave. So we look forward to seeing you at the convention June 11th through 13th and hearing all about your amazing tips. Thank you so much for your wisdom and for your service and ministry that you offer to this community.
Thank you.
My pleasure.